As a tireless defender of the First Amendment, he never seems to escape the headlines. His clients have included Patty Hearst, Leona Helmsley, Jim Bakker, Mike Tyson, O.J. Simpson, and Claus von Bülow. And his involvement in the von Bülow case led to his best-selling book, Reversal of Fortune, one of over 30 he's penned, and the feature film of the same name. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on Interviews, our conversation with activist, author, and famed lawyer, Alan Dershowitz. What is the thrill you get out of teaching?
Oh, there's no greater thrill to get a young person. I look out there and I say, this is the next president of the United States, the next chief justice, the next CEO of a major company, the next editorial writer for the New York Times. I look back on my classes and I think of who I taught and what influence you can have on kids' minds. Now, that's a great responsibility. I never, ever try to indoctrinate students to my point of view. My job is to teach them to think. If they come in as a conservative, I want them to go out as a more thoughtful conservative who can better defend their case. Come in as a liberal, more thoughtful liberal. I don't want them to change their views. I want them to change the quality of their thinking.
Do you ever find students don't get that?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. They say, how come you're not teaching us the stuff, the black letter law? He's too smart for that. Go to the library. Nothing gets discussed in my class which you can figure out on your own. The class is where you get to talk about things that you cannot pick up just by reading a book. Mm-hmm. And so I tell my students, you want to feel comfortable? You want to feel good in class? Hey, there's a good massage parlor down a few blocks away. You want to sweat and have every idea that is deep to the core of your being challenged. Hey, this is the class for you.
Now, what do you learn from them?
Every student generation comes in with new points of view. And so I get exposed to what is the thinking on college campuses, what are the new ways of looking at problems, what are the new values, why are people reflecting one point of view or another, and I see changes. I've been doing this 42 years. So I see changes one generation to the other.
If you weren't teaching, how would it affect your law work?
I don't think I could be anywhere near the lawyer I am today. I'm working on a case right now that inquires the most sophisticated analysis of how the mens rea, the mental process, must interact with the actus reus, the act. A non-academic wouldn't think that way. I use my teaching to make me a better courtroom lawyer, and I use my practice to make me a better in-class lawyer because I teach from both a very theoretical and practical point of view. I think the marriage of theory and practice is what makes me better at both.
Yeah. When did all of this start for you? What was it that made you realize this is the path you needed to take?
When I was about 10 or 11 years old, I was playing Ringalivio in the yard of my schoolhouse. That was a rough kind of game the kids in Brooklyn played. And I ran after somebody and grabbed him, and he slipped and fell, and his leg went under the fence. And when he tried to get up, he broke his leg. I was called into the principal's office and accused of breaking his leg purposely. I was falsely accused. My mother, who graduated high school, had one semester of college during the beginning of the Depression and then had to leave college. My mother came in and defended me more brilliantly than I've ever seen a lawyer defend anybody. And I said to myself, that's what I want to do. I want to defend people who are falsely charged of hurting other people. And it was a real epiphany for me when my mom did that. My mother would have been a Supreme Court justice. If she had been born, 30 years later, or a family that was wealthy, or at a time when feminism had taken hold, my mother was smart enough to be anything, but she ended up, of course, being a bookkeeper and a housewife and, supported her sons.
Did your parents support you in this choice?
Very much so. I mean, look, I was told by my teachers I had a good mouth on me, but not a particularly good brain, so I had to be a lawyer. So they always wanted me to be something where I could use my oratorical skills. They never thought I'd be a professor. That's the last thing that they would have imagined me doing. And then I decided I really wanted to be a teacher.
Yeah. Do you see it as a problem when parents aren't supportive of their children? I mean, had your parents not said, sure, go and do this, if they don't follow the dreams, What can people do on their own?
It's very hard. I've been a parent now to 2 generations. I had my first marriage. I have 2 boys in their 40s, and I was a parent to them, mostly a single parent, because I brought my kids up. And then I am a parent now of a teenage girl. And you can make mistakes either way. You have to be supportive, but you also have to be critical. You also just can't let them do everything they want to do. You have to make for a safe environment, and you have to have credibility and tell them what you think is wrong. And I don't want them to make some of the same mistakes I made. I know they will, but I'm always going to be supportive of my kids, but they also are going to know what I really believe. I don't have an ability to be anything but straight with my kids.
Yeah. I would assume, though, arguing with you would be a tough thing to do for a kid.
Each of my kids is a better arguer than I am.
Really?
My youngest, my daughter, is phenomenal. She's a speech champion, and she beats me in argument all the time, because in addition to having the brilliance to do it, she's my daughter. I can't, beat her in an argument.
Do people miss the fact about what an argument is all about?
Yes. Yes. An argument is, if you're in court, the argument's about winning. But if you're in a classroom, it's not about winning. It's about teaching. And if you're in an interaction with a child, it's not about winning. It's about making sure that your view is well presented and that she or he can make a decision based on the fullest of information.
Now, I know within your career, most of the work you do, or a good chunk of the work you do, is for appeals and
That's
appellate
right.
work.
Right.
And a lot of people, I think, get confused and think if you are doing the appellate work for someone, you must think they are guilty, or this isn't, innocent, or that they aren't involved. It has nothing to do with that.
Well, it has nothing to do with it, and it has everything to do with it. Technically, it has nothing to do with it. I recently won a case just last week in Georgia. And it involved a very, very serious charge. I can't get into it in detail. But one of the lawyers wanted to argue it on purely legal grounds. And I said, no, this court is never going to reverse this conviction unless we can persuade them that this man is innocent. And we had to frame the legal argument along factual grounds. And so as an appellate lawyer, when I can credibly argue the innocence of my client or cast doubt about the prosecution's evidence and integrate that with a legal argument, that's what I try to do.
Do you have to believe somewhere in yourself that they can be not guilty?
No, I don't have to believe that, but I do have to believe that there's been an injustice. I could not effectively argue a case where I didn't believe there was an injustice. The injustice may lie in the process. It may lie in the sentence. It may lie in the failure to hear all sides of the case. It may lie in the failure of the lawyer below to present the case well. I don't think I've ever had a case that I've won where I didn't believe that an injustice had done. I always feel good about the cases I win. I never feel good when I lose. I've had 1 or 2 cases, only 1 or 2, where I've lost when I thought the defendant was innocent. And that is when I really lose sleep at night.
Yeah. When you say an injustice, define that for us.
An injustice is when the process has gone awry, when the wrong person has been convicted, when a lawyer hasn't done a good job, when the sentence is excessive. There are many, many types of injustice.
Do you remember your first high-profile case?
Oh, sure.
What was it?
I guess it was a kid in my neighborhood. I wasn't a real lawyer. I was a very theoretical professor, and this kid's father called me and said, my son's just been indicted for murder. He's facing the death penalty. I said, I'll help you get a lawyer. Couldn't get a lawyer to represent this kid because he was an extreme right-winger and an ideologue, and I couldn't get a lawyer to represent him, so I defended him. My first time really in court in a high-visibility case, front-page story, all over the state of New York and really all over the country, and we won. And we got them off, and they walked out free, and that's really what helped establish my reputation, certainly in the New York area, winning that case because everybody said it was unwinnable. And I won it because as a law professor, I was able to introduce into the courtroom some theoretical arguments that I had developed as a teacher.
Does fame help or hurt you?
Both. Both. It guarantees you attention. But sometimes the prosecutor will say, oh, I can't lose because if Dershowitz beats me, hey, that's expected. And if I beat Dershowitz, it makes my career. So sometimes it hurts. I tell clients right at the outset, look, when you get me as your lawyer, you're getting somebody who's controversial, who, brings attention to a case. if you don't want that, I'll recommend some very quiet, low-key, behind-the-scenes lawyer. So I turn down many, many more cases than I take because I don't think I'm particularly suited to this case.
Really? When you talk about being suited to a case, besides what you just said there, what are the things that qualify as a good case for you?
I want a case which is at the cutting edge of the law, where I can use my kind of theoretical insights into helping to change the law or move the law. I want a case where I think I can help in terms of bringing something to the case that an average lawyer can't bring. I also want a case where I can challenge the government. Remember, I don't do this for a living. Half of my cases are free, pro bono cases, and I make a good salary. So if I didn't earn a single penny doing cases, I would do fine. I write books. So I can challenge the government in ways that practicing lawyers sometimes can't for fear that it will hurt their careers.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever worry when you say you write books, do you ever worry when your opinions, your thoughts are out there, because you're quite public in what you believe, ever hurts you in the courtroom?
I'm very sensitive to that possibility, and so I will tell my client, look, I'm in front of this court, and I've said critical things about this person and that person. Take that into account when you decide whether to hire me. And clients make rational decisions sometimes, utterly irrational decisions. When I represented the play Hair that was banned, one of the producers wouldn't hire me until I told him my birthday and what time of the day I was born, and he checked my astrological chart and told me, well, it was going to be a close case, but we'd win. And we won 5-4 in the Supreme Court.
Wow. So do you put much stock then in astrology? No.
It
doesn't do it for you?
But I tell my clients to pray.
Yeah.
You know, it's, if it helps them, who knows? I'm not an expert in the mysteries of life.
A lot of people know you from Reversal of Fortune,
right.
And I even think some people probably don't realize that you're a real person. You know, they
well,
think
you know that
character.
The guy who played me in Reversal of Fortune, after that movie was very popular and won an Oscar for the Best Actor, Ron Silver got some calls from people asking him to defend them, and he had to say, no, I'm not a lawyer, I just play one of the movies.
How did you feel that film went, though?
I
mean,
loved
it must be weird to see your life.
It's the second weirdest thing.
What's the first weirdest?
The second weirdest is seeing yourself on the screen being played by somebody else. And that was, my son was the co-producer of the movie, Elon Dershowitz, so I knew it was in good hands. The strangest thing was when you've written a novel, as I did, Advocate's Devil, and they make a movie of the novel. They made a made-for-TV ABC special movie, and then I see a man who I invented on the screen. I didn't think of him that way. No, he was blonde, not dark-haired. I didn't create him that way. He's my creation. And they, picked an actor that didn't quite fit my character. But I love that movie, too.
When you wrote the book, though, did you envision scenes as...
Yes.
Does it play out in your head?
Oh, very much so. I'm a very visual person. And I imagine how it would look and how the actor would look, how... This is called The Advocate's Devil, about a basketball player. And I imagine what the basketball player would look like, what the lawyer would look like. And
did they get any of it right for you?
Well, the movie was great. And
right, but did it match the movie you'd already created?
Very different, very different. Right.
Now, talking about video and all of that, cameras in the courtroom. You were involved in a case that had a lot of attention because of the cameras in the courtroom. Of course, the O.J. Simpson case.
And also the Claus von Bülow case was the first one that was really, really the first major trial on television.
Really?
Yeah. And even the appeal, live, real time, on television.
Are you aware of it when you're in the courtroom?
Not for more than a second. You get up there and you are so intensely involved. Like right now, I'm talking to you. I have to remind myself that there's a camera here. I'm having a very nice time having a great conversation with a very good interviewer. In the courtroom, even more so. You're thinking only about your client. You're remembering the transcript. In the von Bülow case, what happened is they had scheduled a certain amount of time for me and then for the other side, and then I got 7 minutes of rebuttal time. But by the time the government had finished its argument, I knew we had won. And I did not get up to take my rebuttal time because I figured it could only hurt the case. A good lawyer has to know when to sit down and shut up. So I didn't take my 7 minutes of rebuttal time, which I rarely waive. But that left the TV station with empty time, and the judge was more concerned about the camera than I was. He was saying, Mr. Dershowitz, don't you really have anything more you want to tell us? He's looking at the cameras, And then they had to fill it in with talking heads. But, my first and only obligation in that courtroom was to win that case.
Are you in favor, then, of the cameras?
I am. I think it shows how our system works. In a democratic country, we should have televisions in the Senate, in the House, in the Supreme Court, at the trial level. Not saying all trials. If you have trials involving children or rape victims, you might want to close the courtroom to cameras. But your typical case should be televised, for better or worse. I'm not saying it's going to produce better justice. I am saying accountability in a democracy is very important.
Yeah. Was there any significance ultimately to the O.J. case, do you think?
No. I think no legal significance. It was a trivial case legally, one of the least important ones in my own career in life. The significance is what it showed about racial tensions in America, how when that verdict came down, the country split. And it's so interesting because I thought that in general, though, those white people who were so upset and who don't get upset when innocent people are convicted, but they got very upset because they thought a guilty person got away with something, that showed a skewing of the system. And I thought that there were some African-American people, at least, who were rooting for O.J., even if he were guilty, to kind of stick it to the establishment. I wasn't happy with any of those views. Yeah. But there were very thoughtful people in both the African-American community and the white community, very thoughtful people who had very thoughtful views about it. And I wrote a book on it in which I said in the end, look, just because the verdict is not guilty, you don't have to believe that. That's not the verdict of history. That's the verdict of the courtroom for a particular trial in which two very mediocre prosecutors who had political ambitions were pitted against very experienced criminal trial lawyers. And I don't think we won that case. I think the prosecution lost that case.
Yeah. How did you folks prepare for the verdict to come? Whichever way it was going to come, was there some sort of preparation? I know you can't really talk about the case itself, but this aspect.
Very much so. I was going to be the appellate lawyer, so I was all prepared for either verdict. Of course, an acquittal means I'm out of business, which is great. I was hoping for that. A conviction means, hey, I move to the forefront and have to argue the appeal. So I was all ready to argue the appeal. I was all ready to frame the issues and file our notice of appeal. I have to admit I was surprised by the verdict. I was not in the court every day, although I watched it on television. I argued only a few days in the court on legal issues. But I thought it would be more likely that there'd be a hung jury. I didn't think there'd be a conviction, but I didn't think there'd be an acquittal. And as soon as, of course, we were told within a few hours that there was a verdict, then it knew it couldn't be a hung jury. So at that point, I was hopeful that there was going to be an acquittal, but I wasn't sure at all.
From a sociological point of view, though, were you prepared for the way people would react?
Well, yeah, because we had gotten a lot of that. Anytime I went into the courtroom, boos and screams and jeers. And, my mother got threatening letters. It was terrible. People would write to my mother saying, I hope your son is stabbed to death the way his client stabbed, the others to death. People just hated me during that trial. A woman spit at me in the street in front of my then 4 or 5-year-old daughter. Somebody attacked me at a concert. My wife had to step between us and separate her from me. She was trying to hit me. People felt so strongly. One woman who I know very well, very liberal, progressive, interesting person, said it was like being hit in the stomach with a baseball bat. And I said to her, but you didn't know any of the people. How could it have that emotional impact? Somehow it captured the emotions of a country.
Yeah. How do you deal with, though, people reacting that strongly to you when they don't know you, they're not even involved? How do you decide
to react
to
strongly
go
to
forward?
me all the time. They react strongly to me because of my support for Israel, even though I believe in the two-state solution, the peace process, the end of the occupation. I'm perceived as a very, very strong supporter of Israel, and of course, the emotions over that issue are so powerful. Right. I'm perceived as a very strong supporter of separation of church and state. That raises incredibly important issues, religion. I'm a civil libertarian. People get very upset about that. So I'm used to people having very strong views. And I'm also a person who brings out strong views in people. I'm in your face. I'm iconoclastic. I say what I think. I don't try to moderate my views and make them acceptable, politically correct. So I'm used to strong feelings.
Back before, though, was there ever a period where it bothered you that people reacted to you in this way?
It bothers me that people think they know me. People see me on television, soundbite Dersh, my wife calls me, and they don't realize that in my personal life, I don't love confrontation. I'm a pushover. My wife, my kids, my family, they can make me do anything they want. I don't like confrontation in my personal life, and I'm a very different person in my personal life than I appear in the 2-minute sound bites.
So why is it so important to you to be out there?
Well, because I have very strong feelings about Israel and the way it's being demonized around the world, and the double standard that's applied to it, and the obsessive focus that the world seems to have on Israel's imperfections, which allows other more deeply offensive acts, genocidal acts, to be ignored by the United Nations and others. I feel very strongly about that. I feel very strongly about separation of church and state. It's been the great success of America that we don't have the state telling religion what to do and religion telling the state what to do. These are the kinds of issues that, in Voltaire's words, I would live and die for. Yeah. And I have to be out there. God or nature blessed me with an ability to be articulate. I'm not going to sit home and watch television. I'm going to get out there and use my ability to communicate, to express my passions. And that's going to cause many people to hate me, and I understand that, and I wish they would take a broader, more forgiving perspective, but that's the risk you take when you're out there.
Yeah, so it's more important to further the cause than to sit back. And,
I turn down 20 television appearances for every one I accept. I generally have 3 rules for accepting a television appearance, for example. I have a client, and my client is being tried in the press, and I want to be able to respond in the press. I have a cause, Israel, civil liberties, separation of church and state, or I have a book, and I want people to read my books. I work very hard on my books. I published 25 of them. I have 10 more in the pipe, in various stages. I hope I'm given the ability to live long enough to finish my project. But I'm going to be out there wanting people to read my books and wanting people to accept my causes and wanting people to support my clients.
You just said you have 10 books in the pipe.
Right.
Do you work one book done, next book? You've got 10
No.
going
I'm
at
always
once?
working 3 or 4 at a time. I found an unpublished letter by Thomas Jefferson recently. It's a great letter about freedom of speech, and I'm writing a book about it called Finding Jefferson. It's my tentative title. I'm going to write a book called Why I Left the Left But Couldn't Join the Right, about the difficulties of extremism in America today. I'm writing a book about the privilege against self-incrimination. I'm writing a novel. I have many, many projects, and I have an enormous amount of energy, and I just love to write. I get on planes and I write, and it's my... If I have to retire ever, I would never retire from writing. That's the one. Writing and teaching are my 2 passions. Cases, eventually I'll stop taking them. Lectures, eventually I'll stop giving them. But teaching and writing, I hope to do for the rest of my life.
There's another point that people bring up that I want to get to before we run out of time, and that's your stance on torture. And people seem to be misquoting that all the time.
All the time. I'm against torture, but I want to do something about it. I don't want to just say I'm against torture. I'm against what happened in Abu Ghraib, but I know that if we ever have a situation where we capture terrorists with real-time information that could stop a bombing in a city or a suicide bombing, we will torture. Every democracy will. Every democracy has. And so I want accountability. I want no torture ever to be permitted unless the president and the chief justice sign on the dotted line saying this is such an extreme case that the necessity principle comes in. We have to break the law. We have to break our treaties. It's a heuristic. It's a way of saying don't torture. Because if you do, you're going to be held accountable. And so people call me Torquemada Dershowitz. They think I'm in favor of torture. Most of the distortion is quite intentional. Because my view isn't that hard to understand. I'm against it morally. I know what happens empirically. I want to do something about it. I'm against the death penalty. But I want to have a process which makes it harder to impose the death penalty. Having that process doesn't make me in favor of the death penalty. Favoring a torture warrant doesn't make me in favor of torture.
How then do international law and our country's laws fit together then? If we
Very
have
difficult.
Problems?
Very, very difficult. Most countries accept the way of the hypocrite. Oh, we'll sign anything. We just won't do it. Jordan, Egypt, the Philippines, torture all the time. America sends our people there to be tortured. We know it. Rendition. That's the hypocrite's way. I don't want a hypocrite's way. If we think we have to do it, let's make it within the law. We should never do anything that's outside the law, and we should never create a law unless we're prepared to live within it.
Yeah. Do you see problems out there today that we are just stumbling along?
Absolutely. The whole issue of preemption, prevention, when we should fight preemptive wars, when we should take preemptive actions, it's without a jurisprudence. That's why I wrote a book called Preemption, A Knife That Cuts Both Ways. It cuts both ways. You can't live with it. You can't live without it. We need constraints, controls, and a jurisprudence.
Yeah. Do you see things changing?
Yes. I think things are changing, and the future is where we started our conversation with the students. They come in fresh, anew. They want to see a better world. They want to see a world that's more realistic and kinder, and I want to give them the tools to make this world a better place.
Yeah, and I do believe you're doing that already.
Thank you.
Professor Dershowitz, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Well, thank you.
Alan Dershowitz.
To order a transcript, call 866-652-3378 or send $6.95 screen. Please include the name of the guest.